In the name of the one who creates us, who redeems us, and whoever gives us life. Amen. I've been thinking about evil a lot lately. I don't know why at my age and at this point in my life, I've become so concerned with evil. I guess at this point, one of my granddaughters would say, "Is Papa being sarcastic?" There seems to be a prevalence of evil in the world today. Now, I've always known it's there, but it just seems to be more of it. Wars and bombings of nuclear facilities, indiscriminate bombings of civilian populations, and unrest all over the world, in Haiti, in Africa. Individuals killing others just because of differing political views. Our government cutting off humanitarian aid to people whose lives actually depend upon it. People in power outright lying, and people saying awful things and claiming that they are really good. And yet, what really bothers me the most about this is I've started thinking of people as being evil. And I can name them. Jesus had to deal with evil. Now, I'm not talking about this cosmic, universal struggle between good and evil, because when we start talking in those terms, everybody assumes they're on the side of good and the other side is evil. No, I'm talking about how did Jesus deal with this? Not Jesus as the Son of God, because that doesn't help me. I want to know how Jesus approached evil as a human being. I think today's gospel is one of those stories that talks about evil, and one of those stories we need to take very seriously. Jesus comes in to a village that's on the other side of the Sea of Galilee, and immediately this man comes up to him with chains, and he's naked, and he falls down before Jesus. And he says, "What do you have to do with me, you Son of God? Don't torment me." The demon is the one speaking here. Now, don't get lost and let your eyes glaze over because we're talking about demons. I think this is very important, because demon possession is something we know a thing or two about. We know a thing or two about possession. Remember COVID-19? It devastated many of us. Mary and I had it before there were vaccines available. We had a friend who died of it. It infected our whole country. It infected our whole world. So we know a thing or two about possession. You see, a virus is something that can only exist and live if it has a host that will allow it to live in it. Because a virus has no power on its own to reproduce and to continue to live. So it needs a willing or even unwilling host in order to survive. I think there is a virus of the soul, and it's called fear. Fear. And like biological viruses, it can only live and survive if it has a host in which it can live, because it can't survive on its own. And this fear, it leads to other illnesses. It leads to lying and cheating and hating and evil. This story is really full of fear. The people in the village were afraid of the man. They put him in chains because he was so fearful. And the man feared them because he was mistreated by the people in the village, and they threw him out of town. And the demons, they feared Jesus. Jesus alone was the only person in the story who was not afraid. What spiritual vaccine does Jesus have that allows him to overcome this fear? It's called love. There is no fear in love, says 1 John, but perfect love casts out fear. Paul says, do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. As far as I know, Jesus never called anyone evil. That's why it disturbs me when I start thinking of people as evil, because even the people who did the most awful things to Jesus at the crucifixion, he didn't call them evil. He said they didn't know what they were doing. To say love your enemies, though, I don't know how that is for you, but it doesn't do a lot for me because I'm not able to do that very well. So what is this love that Jesus has that casts out fear? To say Jesus is the Son of God, that doesn't help us either because we're humans. But Jesus' love was something that was given to him by God. Remember at his baptism, and he heard, "You are my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased." The beloved child. Even before he did anything, he knew from the very beginning he was loved. I think we fear, including myself, that God doesn't love us, or maybe we don't deserve God's love. And that's why we need each other. That's why we are so important to each other. That's why what we are called as Christians to do for one another is to help one another and remind one another that we are loved by God. What if at the peace, instead of turning to each other and saying peace, we said instead, "You are a beloved child of God. You are a beloved child." I can't think of what else the peace of God might be than to be told you are beloved. To know that you are loved by God is the peace that passes all understanding. But back to the story. I love the way Luke puts this whole event together. And the end of the story may be the most important part of the story. And it may be what Luke wants us to take away from this story. Jesus never speaks to the man until the very end of the story. Jesus is leaving because the people are afraid of him and they ask him to leave. And as he's leaving, the man comes up to him and he wants to go with Jesus. And Jesus surprisingly says, no. He says, stay where you are. You are a changed person, and I want you to stay here among these people who are so afraid. Stay here and tell everyone what God has done for you. And so he does. He stays and he goes and he tells everyone what Jesus did for him. And I can just see Jesus shaking his head and says, that ain't what I told you to do. But it's a good start. And I think you'll get the job done. That very well may be what Jesus wants us to do and what Jesus is saying to us. Where you are is where you need to be. And I want you to know that you are loved beyond measure by God. And that love will give you the courage to do what you need to do and the clarity of mind to figure it out. And I trust you to do it. Amen.